one, Master Xeon 1001 here. And for this introduction, this is my 5th take. I just keep getting them wrong. Anyways, this video is about the improvements that's come since the 7.13 All About Boxcutter demo. This one's kind of from 7.13 all the way to right now of our latest Bugfix release. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in. This blend that you see in the background here is from a Boxcutter HQ environment. I did just kind of playing around. I hope to go over some of the ideas that we're going for with this release over the course of this video, just kind of give you some ideas. But this one isn't going to be a normal demo where I'm just going over everything. It's just going to be me discussing each of the features one by one in depth, just kind of giving users who jumped on at 7.13 and have already seen that video just a recap of everything that's going on up till now, as well as discuss our plans for the future. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin. After installing Boxcutter, meaning that for this update you did remove the old version to install this update, you can start Boxcutter by either clicking the icon in the T panel, pressing the hotkey Alt-W. There's even the N panel, which if we press in, you can click on the word Alt-W or activate Boxcutter, and it will just activate Boxcutter, allowing you to get started. While Boxcutter is up, you can press D for its special pie menu, allowing you to access all of the main options and start operations as well as your shape, and activate snapping. Control D will bring up a smaller, simplified helper for helping you just get started with Boxcutter if that's more of your jam. And as long as you have it set to object and the object is selected, just clicking and dragging will allow you to draw. Pressing B will bevel the shape. As far as help goes, right now we're in tab to live, where I press tab. We can expand the help, and you can see now over the course of drawing that help is being displayed, letting me know I can press X to toggle this into a slice. I can press J to toggle this into a join, and with these dots I'm able to continue adjusting the shape. And that's basically a recap on the fundamentals of Boxcutter. As far as the top bar goes, you do have options for having a simple top bar, which is just a narrowed down version, or under the behavioral sprocket display, you can uncheck it, which will be more expansive and show you all the options you have at your disposal, more optimal for tablet use. Fade was the highlight of the 7.14 release. So that's the first feature that we'll be focusing on here. Whenever you draw a shape and you click to apply, it'll do a simple little fade out. However, at this time, our settings are set to 1050 milliseconds. So if we take this and increase it to 300 and 600, we can actually keep this around a little bit longer, and you can see it fade into existence and fade out gradually. While this is a very nice aesthetic, I was quite happy to have this added. It also brings some additional capabilities to the table. So we'll just draw a quick little cut, and if I hold Control and click, you can see that because of the fade, there's now an after image left of the cutter, letting me know what is going on here. In conjunction with grid, this is extremely powerful. Also Lazorcut. Lazorcut used to be an operational thing that you would just cut, click and let go, and you wouldn't be able to see what happened. But now with fade, you're able to see exactly what the cut is that you had happen, even if you did it in the blink of an eye. So the settings here are really aesthetic, so it shouldn't have anything to do with performance. However, it does have something to do with the visuals of the performance. So we take this up to 600 and 1600, which are some common settings that I'll rock. You can see that the fade in is a lot longer, allowing me to do multi-draw shape fading. This was a big part of the release. It wouldn't have happened the way it did if multi-shape wasn't a part of it. So I'm very grateful for this actually surviving into the final cut. And now that we're deeply into the 7.15 release, the fade system is the status quo, meaning that we shouldn't be removing it or retooling it or replacing it in the future, because we've made several releases go by without us having to go back and revisit the fade. So fade is something that's aesthetic, but just know that in the event that you're doing some repeat shapes or laser cutting, that it's also there for you to make your experience just a little more visual. So with that, we'll move on to the next point. With boxcutter, one of my favorite features is the extract, so I'm determined to ensure that it gets to a level of perfection sometime in our lifetime. So we're just going to quickly draw a couple of box cuts, just drawing boxes, press T to give it some thickness. We'll draw another one here, laser cut, draw another one there, and I'll just draw a box encompassing everything, but I'll press Y in order to trigger extract. And notice that whenever I draw this extraction, it just fades out. There's no longer a shape being left in the center, which I found to be particularly jarring when demonstrating this workflow because it just wasn't aesthetically pleasing. So now you're able to extract peacefully and get the result that you want without having a unrecognizable extraction sitting in the middle of your scene messing up your flow. So in a nutshell, that is extraction hide. For the purposes of demonstrating this, under behaviors, I have Accucut Lazorcut turned off. So previously when we did a laser cut, the result would be something like this, where the mesh would stick out just a little bit far in space. And we always kind of joked about how it would be cool if Lazorcut just didn't do that, if it didn't launch itself so far out in space. Because if we press Alt H and we look at all the cutters, it's just not the most aesthetically pleasing experience. So this is something that bothered me and bothered all of us, and we talked about internally, and we came up with this term Accucut, where it was like, if we solve this thing and we make it work out right, we'll call it Accucut because it'll basically be an accurate cut. So by default, boxcutter has Accucut turned on, which means that whenever you perform a laser cut operation, you can see that the mesh is attempting to properly be fitted to the shape. As a result of this small change, sometimes there is a small margin of error that can occur when it comes to scale being unapplied. For example, let's make a new file. Probably have a Boolean issue there. We'll scale this down in object mode, and we'll just draw a box cut. And you can see that the box cut did not go all the way through. And this is because I have to press Control A and apply to scale. So I'm pointing this out because this actually comes up so often as a bug that I report it over and over. I'm like, hey, Accucut isn't working right. Accucut isn't good enough. But really, Accucut needs to calculate what scale being applied. So this is just something to take in mind if you're using a new box cutter and you're having your laser cut not cut all the way through to shape. There's a couple of other issues that could also cause laser cut to behave inadequately. For example, if you set the depth will also lock down the laser cut to be a particular depth, but we'll be getting more into that later. But for now, I just wanted to demonstrate how through the power of fade, we're able to just really take a look at laser cut and see what it is. And now it is a little bit more form-fitting, which is just much better looking than it was previously. Well, if 714 had fade as the Batman, then edit mode would be the Robin of the 714 release. So if we click and drag, we start drawing a shape. If we bring it down to extrude and press tab, a series of dots will appear. And you can actually move these dots in order to adjust your shape on the fly, which makes modifying things a little bit easier. We do have plans for improving this dramatically in the future. I would consider this the first level of the edit mode system. This dot right here is associated with the bevel. Notice that when I pull it in and bring it out, it turns a bevel into a chamfer and vice versa. This was something that we saw in Shaper on iPad, and it just seemed like it was a no-brainer. It's like, why doesn't all programs do this? So I'm hoping that this can extend to bevel width someday. But for now, it is locked in here on boxcutter. So with our shape here, you currently can't rotate. We'll be adding rotate very shortly. That's one of the next things on the big list. Once you're done with this, you can click to apply. But tab to live was a very popular mode before, and with the dots, it now is a lot more expansive. Interestingly, this dot is what's called the draw dot. So it plays by the same rules as draw, meaning that while clicking and dragging it, if we hold Alt, it actually changes it to a center draw. And if we change it to Shift, it turns it into a square draw, with Shift and Alt making a square constrained draw. So the same rules apply as you would when drawing. And this can come in handy for something like Radial Array. So we'll go ahead and click to apply this. And let's say we wanted to put a Radial Array right here. I can use that dot to jump off, We'll just draw our box just like we always would. We'll press V and then V again to Radial Array. So we have this kind of hex pattern that kind of reminds me of Tecmo on Nintendo. So instead we want it to be a little more equalized. We can grab this draw dot, which is the only one in the corner that isn't blue. And by grabbing it and holding Alt, we can now draw this with it being perfectly centered, allowing us to get that desired result. In addition to being in this mode, you also have a dot for displacement, which will allow you to push how far you want the radial array to go out. In the future, dots will be expanding into widgets and another level of control for dealing with these shapes, but we'll be getting more into that later on. But for now, dots is our placeholder for a mode that is to come. This particular feature might have been run by talking about the feature previous, but Radial Array has now been added to Boxcutter. So we'll just put a circle right here, extrude, press V for array. And when you're in array, you can press X, Y, or Z to change your axis. And then you can press V a second time to activate Radial Array. Radial Array usually defaults to 3. And if we roll the wheel, you can add additional shapes to the count. By clicking, we can tap to live and drag the bottom and the top in order to adjust our extrude and offset. Since we're inside of circle mode, we're able to grab this draw dot, this particular dot in order to adjust the displacement, and this dot to adjust the draw. So you can see that with this, we're able to really get the circle exactly how we want. However, this is, I would consider, the first level of Radial Array. We do have a lot of plans for improving it in the future, like a lockdown system and the ability to use the object central origin as the array radial point, which I think would result in more consecutive arrays happening. However, before that, we should attack the issue of performance. But I just wanted to go over Radial Array just a little bit and let you know that it is something that is around for use. For example, like right here, I actually want to snap another shape and add it to this Radial Array. But due to these shapes actually turning this into a Boolean face of randomness, it's not going to work. So in order to do this, what I'll do is put the 3D cursor there, press Q, and we'll just use modifier toggle to just turn that off. We'll snap here, make our shape, VV to bring it out, and we'll just roll the wheel to get it right where we want it. And then when we click to apply, here's our shape. So I'll press Q, bring back the object scroll, and we'll just bring back the right one and just add additional meshes to it until we get the right count here, which is right here, and we can just scale that in. So in a way, you are able to work off of the same consecutive radial cut. However, in the future, we would like to make this a lot more straightforward. But just for now, you do have Radial Array, and it extends to all shapes ranging from circle to box to ngon. Any of these shapes can be radial arrayed, even if the way that they radial array don't make the most sense at this time. For example, we radial array something like the ngon, and we could see that we definitely may need to come up with a special solution just for ngon in order to ensure that it's exactly the result that users would want. However, at this time, we did at least begin our first attempts with Radial Array and Boxcutter, and it'll only be getting better from here. So continuing on. So in the previous versions of Boxcutter, we integrated a form of snapping that used verts, edge midpoints, and face centers. So whenever you held Control, it would highlight dots over those particular areas, allowing you to quickly grab an area like this, draw a box, and hold Alt to bring it out, and just grab these dots in order to bring your shape forward. Users made it apparent that they were wanting to do more than that. I received a lot of support emails of people who were trying to go from dot to dot, which in my mind, I was like, why would people want to do that? If you went from this dot to this dot and around these, you would actually cause a hotline because you're cutting precisely on another edge. So with the notes that we received from the previous complaints aside, we introduced a new grid. So we'll go ahead and enable that here. And with object, the grid is able to be aligned to the surface. And this is going to introduce a new way of working. Right now, the grid is a little rough. As I said in the release notes, it was a photo finish. So by the end of it, we were simply wanting to get this out the door in order to set this as the new status quo and then go from there. Since we had already worked on 2 different prototypes that were rejected, and this one was the closest one to the final result, as well as something fitting the aesthetic that we were looking for. So you can see that by holding control and having a grid, you're able to get a lot more versatility out of things and snap from point to point, which is something that users had been requesting. Of course, the new grid system is supported across all tools in ngon, circle, custom cutter. However, we still do have a little bit of finessing in order to get it to the form that we want it to be. The interesting thing about repeat shape, or the interesting about fade, repeat shape, and grid is that together, all in conjunction, they add for a rather interesting experience. Right here, we drew a box. We'll grab this point here, double click, select this point, double click, and just keep going. And you can see that with the power of our grid in its current state, we're able to quickly repeat things on these dots in the exact same areas that we're needing to, giving us a unprecedented level of precision for repeat, which is something that I was not expecting with grid. In fact, we will try that again. Sometimes you'll hotline, so it's important to be aware of what's going on with your booleans underneath all the pretty fading and fancy grid. But with that, is just a quick overview on grid. The documentation has been updated on this, but we still do have a long road to go before this grid is able to make its way to prime time. So I just wanted to show a quick overview of just the grid and what it brings to the table with boxcutter. Grid works with the grid floor as well. So if we deselect the object, you can see that we've made the grid actually the same color as the grid floor. And the interesting thing about this grid is that we are able to use it for level blocking. So just to show that in action, we'll just grab this dot, bring it here, drag that up, bring another one up here. And so I do plan on going into this more in depth in the future, but this is pretty much the process that I used with making the corridor I was showing at the beginning of this. In fact, in the future, we want to add the ability to draw collection instances, so that way people can literally draw levels as they complete the pieces in external collections. But there's a long road ahead for grid. So I'm glad for everyone who complained about it to get us to try another solution for it, because the enthusiasm received for this particular update has shown that snapping is something that we should definitely continue to expand on in subsequent updates to get it to the level that people are talking about. I get people writing me about co-planners and tangents and things like that. And it just goes to show that with a good snapping system, we could create a variety of shapes that I didn't even think were possible previously. So it's just something that I wanted to discuss with you guys. In addition to being able to just draw shapes and use Lazorcut, we're also able to go under shape and use something like depth, which depth is related to Lazorcut. So if we set this to 2, we can actually go to box and just draw a box, and it will just snap to the amount that we want it to. Except in that case, it actually snapped the wrong direction. Let's try that again. And it looks like it's going to make a fool out of me today. But we'll be getting more into Lazorcut Depth later. So sort is one of those complicated things to really explain in depth, really fast. So more than likely I'll be doing a expanded video on this topic of sort in the future. However, just to show it in action, we'll use a little bit of HardOps active mirror with Alt X, and we'll shift click bisect to just split this in half. And then we'll put a screw modifier on it for the x-axis. And we'll tab in edit mode, and we'll select this one vert, and we're just gonna put a bevel on it, give it one segment. And from here, we're going to control click the bevel. And this is basically the start of a solenoid. You know, we've all been there doing the solenoid, you know. So now, by default, boxcutter should be more readily capable of sorting the modifiers as you need by default. This is based off of criticism of everyone who's commented on the solenoid video. What we're looking at here are the normals actually being flipped because we just quickly generated the shape non-destructively. So I'll press Control tilde, and we'll just go to the screw and we'll choose Calc Order, Flip, and now things are actually where they need to be. We can press Alt X, change this to modifier, mirror it below itself, Q, Object Scroll. We could bring back Object Scroll and really get this thing just right. But the purpose of demonstrating this is that now the sort options in Boxcutter have an entire panel dedicated to sorting only the last iteration of certain modifiers. So if you're working on an extremely non-destructive model and you're wanting to keep the stack undisturbed for the earlier area of the stack, this is something that's just been built into it. So for the most part, all you should have to do is go in and disable which ones you don't want sorted, and everything else should just be handled by Boxcutter. But like I said, I'll be going over sort in a future video. However, at this time, just know that some of the issues that were associated with sort and working with multiple mirrors has been resolved, just making the process of making a solenoid even easier. So I do plan to show kind of how the solenoid game continues to change in the next video, but for now I just want to let y'all know that sort has been improved, and this is across hard ops, Boxcutter, and kit ops. However, Boxcutter's update is already out, kit ops is already out as well, but hard ops will actually have to take place at a later time. So if you look at the previous hard ops install, the one that you probably have installed at this time, the help that's in there, the sort that's in there is actually sort v2, with this one being sort v3. And I can't wait to show what it brings to the table as far as working non-destructively in the future. But now you should be able to get much, much farther without having to think about what sort is and how to turn it off. In general Boxcutter use, you would click and drag on the surface to begin your cut, and then let go and move the mouse to begin your extrude process. However, with Quick Execute, you are able to bypass the extrusion phase and quickly just cut all the way through a shape if needed. In conjunction to Quick Execute and Lazorcut, which is being used here, you can also go under Shape, and we could set the depth to be a specific number. So if we wanted it to specifically cut something like that, we could make our start shape be bevel. So now we're basically cutting rounded bevel pieces in here. However, what if you wanted to just quickly bypass the behavior of Quick Execute in order to go deeper? Well, while holding left click, you can press right click, which will put you in this pause state, allowing you to drag the shape down and perfect it inside of the pause mode. This is something that was previously not possible, but now is possible inside of Boxcutter in the event that you're needing to make very fine tuning to the experience of your extrusion previous to letting the Quick Execute handle things. And in addition to this, you can go back and just keep cutting with Quick Execute on without having to interrupt your workflow here. So if I wanted to bring this down just a little bit, we could still do that by just putting it in a cancel state. However, if I wanted to trigger the auto depth, we could do that as well by just bringing it up here and then just clicking, which overwrote that area. But just wanted to show that there have been some improvements with Quick Execute and its connection with Accucut and Lazorcut inside of Boxcutter. Right now we have our object selected, we're in cut and box, and we're in non-destructive mode. So every cut that we do, you can see is leaving a cutter behind in the collection, which is fine in most cases. However, we do have a lot of users who would like to get rid of those cuts upon applying the booleans on a cutter. So we did add options to that. If you select the shape here, there is this apply boolean icon. If we click on that, you can see that it not only applies all the booleans, but it removes them out of the collection here. To further expand on it, if you go into destructive mode, you can now see that the cutter is created only at the beginning, but the cutter and the entire collection is removed at the end of the operation, keeping things clean in the scene for users who were wanting to use Boxcutter destructively. Now destructively has been expanded. We were of the opinion that more users would notice if non-destructive wasn't performing adequately than destructive. So destructive mode has always existed sort of as an afterthought, but now we're actually going in and fleshing out some of the logical inconsistencies that existed with it previous. So regardless of whether you work non-destructive or destructive, you should have the versatility of being able to keep your shapes live until you no longer need them, apply them the second that you need to apply them. Right now, the laser cut isn't going all the way through because under shape, my depth is set to 0.5. For the purpose of this example, we'll press Q and use object scroll, and we'll bring back this particular cutter. And if we use this one, we select this particular cutter and we click the apply boolean, notice that this cutter will disappear and this single cutter will be applied. So if we tap into edit mode, everything else has been cut destructively and has been applied iteratively because we've been messing with this thing. But this cut has been applied, and we can go through and bring in another one and apply that. And clicking on apply will remove the cutter and apply it on the target mesh. So it's quite an improvement for people who were wanting to work destructively and non-destructively at the same time and apply things on the go. I do also plan to port some of this behavior over to hops to enhance its Boolean behaviors. But that is our delete and non-destructive destructive improvements in a nutshell. We've talked about Lazorcut, Accucut, and Depth over the course of this video a couple of times. So Accucut Depth is located right under Lazorcut Limit. If we set this to something like 0.5, we can choose the bevel box, and whenever we activate Lazorcut, it cuts precisely to the depth that we have specified here. And that's really Lazorcut Depth in a nutshell. With the new Accucut, we found that we were also able to cut accurately to a particular depth, which this comes in handy for cutting accents on the edges of models. But just want to show that there is a parameter for Lazorcut Depth right here, and that whenever you're not using it, you definitely want to set this to 0. I personally wanted to put a 0 out button next to it that users could click that would actually just put this back to 0, because it's either going to be a number or it's going to be 0. But definitely keep this depth in mind if you're experimenting with things. Perhaps sometime in the future we may also want the ability to bring something down to a level and then press a button to inherit that depth as our Lazorcut depth and use it for our next cut. But these are all things that are still in the process of being planned and talked about. But I just wanted to show this quick feature in action so that it could be utilized. It is one that I was quite excited for. Sometimes we make global calls that aren't always the best calls. One of those calls was making Alt-W enable the top bar, which alleviated new users and made it easier for them to definitely get their top bar showing, causing me to have to link them to the where's my top bar page a lot less often. But pro users who had gotten acquainted with not working with the top bar weren't big fans of it. So we did add an option for enable top bar. By toggling this off, we'll actually exit boxcutter by choosing a different tool here, and we'll right click and just remove our tool settings. And if we press Alt-W, you can see that boxcutter started. I'm able to work in this mode without any sort of top bar whatsoever. Press W to exit, press Alt-W to go back into boxcutter, press Alt-W to switch between hops tool, which also won't show the top bar, press Alt-W to go back to boxcutter, and you can see that it's now just locked in there. If you don't want the top bar, we won't force it on you. I apologize for making such a large change without having it on a toggle, because, you know, of course the pro users will be the first to point out, hey, I don't want that top bar, get rid of it, because, you know, the D panel's also, I mean, the D pie menu is also pretty good, and the Control D helper that comes up before you use boxcutter has plenty of options for helping you set your cutting experience just right, as well as even setting up material cut, which I'll be going into later. But in the event that you need it, for example, we can actually even change this to a different tool. Actually, we want to be in boxcutter, so we can press D, go under the behavior panel, turn on enable tool settings, and then exit the tool. And if we press Alt-W, you can see that now the top bar pops back up. So in the event that your top bar is not popping up with Alt plus W, you can always just go under the behavioral sprocket or in your preferences and choose to enable tool settings or enable top bar. And hopefully that should be considered an improvement. Circles and ovals are two of the things we've had an intimate relationship with. over the course of making circle, one of the things that I emphasized was no ovals, please. So thanks to the latest updates, we've now sorted out the source of the oval circle situation. So that comes down to something called keep modifiers. So we'll collapse these other ones and show only the keep modifiers. These are the modifiers that are kept live after an operation on the cutter. So we have bevel, solidify, array, weld in 2.82, mirror, spin, and lattice. Spin and lattice are the two that I want to discuss here, because by having spin off, that means when we draw a circle, it gets applied. And by having lattice, that means whenever we shape the shape, it also gets applied. So there's no further questions about those two things there. I mean, whenever they're off, they just get applied. For spin to work with ovals, you have to have keep screw off. Otherwise, you'll also have to have lattice on to control the deformation, if you think about how a non-destructive oval actually works. So just to show that in action, we'll have keep screw on, and we'll draw a circle, but I'll press Alt to draw an oval. And you'll see that it just turns into a circle. And this is because the circle is actually a vertice that's being spun around. And unless we keep the lattice, it's not going to maintain the deformation. So now we'll draw a circle, and you can see that now the circle is working fine. However, I personally don't recommend having keep screw on and keep lattice on, because lattices shouldn't be kept under any circumstances, at least Master Xeon 2019, quote me on that. And spin, as long as we keep screw from not being applied, we can actually run a normal calculation at the end, which prevents flip normals from happening every 10 screws when a screw is just calculated inadequately due to randomness. You can't dictate the normal from a vertice. So if you're spinning a vertice, eventually the normals are going to face another direction. But by keeping both of these off, we can now draw circles, and we can also draw ovals just on the fly. I mean, I don't know why you guys are wanting to draw circles and ovals. Well, I understand the circles part. I don't understand the ovals part. However, after playing with it a bit, I did find that, there's some fun to be had with ovals out there. So not to attack, the Ovaltine fans, there's definitely a use for it out there, but just showing that this is the source of the cause of any sort of oval related glitches. And just wanted to emphasize that this issue has been solved on our side. I was just suggesting that we might do some sort of keep override for oval situations in order to ensure that they come out successfully at the end, because people shouldn't have to think about the sort and the keep while they're working. But with that, we'll move on to the next area of focus. Blue box is a box that's used just for cutting edges in a shape. So just to show blue box, we'll just draw a blue box, and you can see that when you start in blue box and you begin to draw, it actually shows the wires on the object. A very nice touch. In the end, I would like the wires to fade out a little bit longer afterwards so we can have a moment to dwell on what's going on with the knife box, but just wanted to show the knife box in action. We'll duplicate this around just to create some duplicates, and if we select a shape and press numpad / we go in local mode, where it's just us and this one box that we've already did a little bit of a number on. I just want to emphasize that in local mode, if you press Alt W to start boxcutter, there is no longer a game stopping error with local mode and boxcutter. So this is something that I'm very glad that we were able to improve. Previously, local mode would get disasters for blue box, and now you're able to use blue box both 3D and 2D in local mode without any sort of issue. In fact, right here, orientation's getting a little weird. Let's try that again. All right, so not sure what happened there. Also, while we're still in local mode, just know that we can still cut. If we're lucky, we can inset, but now local mode is more readily supported. In preparation for the improvements that we're going to be doing with dots in our boxcutter edit mode in the future, we remove the Q bevel dot. So we'll just draw a shape, bring it down, and press B and tab. And we have our draw dot, we have our extrude dot, we have our offset dot, And now you will notice that we have only one bevel dot. Previously we had two, which would actually activate what is called the Q contour bevel. This seemed like it was a good idea at first, however this was more trouble than it was worth and has now been removed, resulting in a more clean experience. Someday we'll be expanding these dots to go into even more of our systems, but for now bevel is the first one, kind of the prototype for what we aim to achieve with this. And now with the removal of the Q bevel dot, this area is a lot cleaner to deal with and it's just faster. Material cut has now been brought back in full in Boxcutter. So to show that in action, we'll just duplicate this cube, and I'm going to use the Hard Ops Alt-M menu to assign a blank material, which will give me a random viewport material as well. And we're just going to draw a shape here and press M to cycle material cut, and we are on the first material. And you see that now every cut will now inherit that material cut behavior. So previously material cut was extended only to slices, and we realized that it was wrong of us to tease a feature and not bring it back in full. So this has been on the checklist for the last 4 releases, and now it's finally been done. During draw, you can press Z to change to Inset, and you'll also notice that Inset has had special care taken care of it to ensure that instead of just shading every part of the cut inward, we're only cutting the insetted area. And so we still have to make these improvements over on the hop side as well. However, there are larger things cooking on the hop side that we'll need to be addressing in the future. But material cut is now back and more powerful than ever. So I hope you guys give it a try and enjoy it. Get in there, just cut some materials. It's great. However, we do plan to come back and re-examine how Custom Cutter behaves with material cut. For that one, we may have to do a multi-force material system, because the goal is to someday use Boxcutter to cut in windows and parallax shaders and the entire interior of a room in a single cut, basically simplifying architectural working. But that's a story for another day. But for now, material cut is back. I hope you guys give it a try. As of Blender 2.82, the weld modifier has been added, which means that we can now unlock the profile on the bevel. So previously you could only bevel to a certain threshold. Now you are able to bevel all the way to the middle, and the merge modifier will take care of the heavy lifting as far as ensuring that everything that you're cutting here is going to become a contiguous mesh for the purposes of cutting. If we were to demonstrate this another way where it's actually a failing scenario, we'll put a 2D bevel on this, except we'll need to use a Control tilde helper to remove the weld modifier because it's actually been added here as well. And if we give this thickness, select both of these, Control numpad minus, you can see that this cut just doesn't work out, and that is because it needs the weld modifier in order to clean up those few points that are there. And you can see at the moment that it adds that weld modifier that has been changed. Weld has been extended over to a variety of our tools from bevel to ngon, and more than likely in the future will also be supporting features like freehand and stroke. But for now, weld is already in the process of being integrated. We have it added to the sort section as a modifier that you're able to sort and only sort one level of, depending on how you're dealing with it in your stack. In addition to that, it's also on the keep modifier. So if we were to, let's say, draw a box, bevel it, shift to live, we can actually take this Control tilde and look at it and see that the weld modifier is there, saving our bacon. However, before, we actually had a slight limit to our bevel offset that would stop it just short of getting in the center and being problematic. So thanks to the power of the weld modifier, that now is something that we don't have to think about as much. However, I do hope with all my heart that the weld modifier is capable of removing coplanar faces, coplanar interior faces, as well as has a toggle for the face dissolving behavior. Otherwise, it will be a little bit less than what it could possibly be, but that's a talk for another day. Continuing on. So pressing Alt plus Z will let you see through the mesh. This is something that I use quite a bit just to see what's going on. And so a common thing I would do is I would start drawing, I would jump into extrude, I would press H to see through my shape, tab to live, And I would want to turn off this solid view. And you would press Alt Z to do that, and you weren't able to do that before. Now you're able to Shift Z for wire mode, Alt Z for solid mode, Alt Z for see-through mode in addition to solid mode. And we can press Shift Z to go back to solid mode. All of this inside of Draw is now possible in the latest update of Boxcutter. This is something that I am quite happy for, and I cannot wait to be in the thick of cutting boxes in wireframe mode and need to toggle it and find that that functionality has now been given back to us. This is one of those things that until it's been taken from you, you never realize how valuable it truly is. But the ability to draw a box, tab into edit mode, Alt Z, look inside of it, Shift Z, look at the wireframe version of it, just results in just a whole nother level of versatility being brought back to this particular tool. So with that, we'll move on to the next feature, but just wanted to let you guys know that during Draw, you can now press Shift Z and Alt Z in order to toggle wireframe and see-through during Draw, during pause state, no problem with Boxcutter. Whenever you're using Boxcutter, every shape that you draw immediately just gets taken out of the scene, indestructible or non-destructive. And that is of course by design, because having cutters on the screen just isn't aesthetically pleasing. However, changing this is due to two settings. One is auto hide, meaning that every cutter is hidden on the next draw, and show shape, which means that the shape that you draw will be left behind. Of course, in a previous update, we added the ability to press L to toggle live, which will make it green. However, now if you press L, it will also toggle show shape at the same time, resulting in a true permanent left behind shape mode. In fact, I can press L during draw, you see the green border goes away, and the next draw, all the shapes will be hidden again. And I could draw a shape, press L, with the green border, I know that it'll be kept. The reason that I pressed H to go back into solid from wire is because we haven't yet added a live display toggle to wire mode yet. I'm still pondering it. I was going to say make the line thicker or something like that, but we got to choose something a little more aesthetic for that. In the future, we definitely want to put some sort of notification panel letting users know of the various gotchas that are active at any given moment, so that way you can see, hey, I got Lazorcut offset on and things like that. But in the future, we'll be expanding wire to also be more visual of it being in this live state. But you can see that now when I draw, the main shape never loses its selection and the sub shape is never selected. In fact, if I wanted to do that, I would actually hold Shift, and then that would become the selection, allowing me to quickly grab this and rotate it and move it around or whatever I need to do in order to perfect this operation. So in short, if we take it back to the beginning, all this means is that if you're drawing a shape and you want to keep it afterwards, you can press L and it will stay. And the next shape will also stay. And the shapes that you draw from then on after the point that you press L will stay until you go in here and you click on auto hide and turn off show shape. And now you can see that every cut, the shapes will go back to disappearing, resulting in a more streamlined, optimized experience. This is one of those quality of life improvements I'd been asking for forever, and it turned out the final solution turned out to just be 3 lines of code. So those are always the best solution, are the ones that are just a few lines of code, because it means that hopefully there shouldn't be bugs to make us revisit it in the future. But this is something I'm excited about seeing in Boxcutter, the ability to press L, work in live mode, and just have no effect take place on what's going on as far as the selection goes, resulting in a more continuous, uninterrupted workflow, even while working in this live mode, where I can still select shapes, press Q, add thickness, and go on with my normal day. And we can just draw a shape in Boxcutter and press L to toggle that off. And maybe even in the future, we'll make it where if you toggle L in the middle of the draw, it'll hide it at the end of the draw at the end, as I'm seeing this in action. But just wanted to go over this being a particular improvement for Boxcutter. So right before the final release, one of the final suggestions I had was it sure would be nice if the grid was the same color as the cutter whenever you hovered over it, just so whenever we see users use the tool, we know exactly what's going on just from looking at the grid as far as what they have on and what they're trying to go for. However, one of the logical inconsistencies that we found was if grid was off, grid would still be there. So I did talk Proxy into adding just a single dot to be the grid whenever grid is actually off, which I find to be a bit of an improvement. Whenever the object is selected, you can see that the grid is the color of the cutter. However, when the object is deselected, the grid is actually the same color as the grid, or not the same color as the grid floor, but it's actually a neutral gray, letting you know that whenever you draw, you're going to be drawing a gray box, because with nothing selected, all you can draw is a gray box. So this is just one of those little logical inconsistencies that was kind of driving me crazy after post-release, was having a red grid with nothing selected, but I'm glad that that's finally been resolved and should be present in the latest update. When it comes to mirroring in Boxcutter, I have thrown up hundreds of suggestions for different ways we can approach mirroring and improve mirroring. Most of them involving us getting a little bit further in our development to be able to introduce widgets and on-screen things like that. However, solving it inherently at all levels is something that I find to be essential. So without further ado, I'm happy to say that the mirror in Boxcutter has been improved. So if we choose mirror as our start operation, you can see that mirror just works. No more choosing the right side that you want to draw on. Now there's actually a dimensional check that will make sure that if the mirror's coming in at 0 dimensions, that it will actually flip the bisect and vice versa, in order to ensure that no matter what side you draw on, the mirroring will work. And of course, mirroring can be turned on during draw with 1, 2, or 3. And you can even turn on all 3 mirrors at the same time and just work that way, as you see me doing here. But that is pretty much it. I just wanted to show that now the mirror has been made to be much more flexible, and you should be able to start from any side. Like right here, we can see that it still has a little bit of logic happening with the Z that we'll need to check into. So if we press 3, 2, we can actually flip it. So the flipping behavior still exists. So it's only for the start behavior at this time. Even as I tested here, I could see that there's still some things that we may need to improve in the future. However, the first step is ensuring that every time that you draw, your mirror is present, and being able to see it every time you press the numerical keys, at least in the middle of the drawing phase. So I hope you guys give that a try. I can definitely say that this is a dramatic improvement over the previous mirror, which might have been a little harder to understand for beginners. Alright, so now we've reached the conclusion of this video, so I'll just take a moment to talk to you guys. As far as this release went, the grid received 2 alternative iterations that never made it out to customers that were rejected. And so the final version that we released was the one that was closest to the result that we wanted, that we knew that we could actually go forward on, versus the other ones that had inherent limitations that we would have been fighting for all time, and then it would have eventually resulted in a rewrite. You know, with 2.8, a lot of the decisions we made as far as design and configuring the UI and putting things together, we had to think of all these things kind of on our feet for the port over to 2.8. So some things aren't as fluid and as perfect as we want it to be, but we're always discussing how we can make it even better. So, you know, things may look rough at this moment. You know, customers jumping in at this time may find, oh, it's a little hectic, but 2.8 itself is hectic. You know, as the program changes, we're trying to evolve to continue evolving along with it, because every improvement improves us. So, you know, with this next 2.2 update, having UDIMs and Weld support is going to be a game changer, even in its current state. But if it gets even better, it just further raises the roof on what we're possibly able to accomplish in the future. And it's thanks to you, the viewer, that we're able to continue on this journey, this wonderland of plugin development, of talking about tools all day and like literally living lives based around tools, which is something I never thought I would do. You know, Hard Ops was originally made to help me write a book, and in the end it turned out that the book was the tool, and that the tool is a constant source of education for me, with users always humbling me, showing me how the tool should actually be used. You know, all we can do is make the tool, but it's up to you, the users, to show us how it's supposed to be done. So I'm eternally grateful for everyone's support, the comments, the likes, the subscribers. I notice every single one of y'all, especially someone, shout out to the Facebook guy, the Facebook guys, Ponty, Ryu, Hutto, everybody who's just killing it over in the Hops Facebook group. The Discord users, y'all are your own breed, keeping the board alive 24 hours a day. I really can't wait to show the next hard ops to y'all. It's been cooking for so long. Just keep that in mind. We've released 10 updates to boxcutter 715, but we just stopped for hard ops. So something big is coming, and we can't wait to show you what comes next. All right, so now we've reached the conclusion of this video, so I'll just take a moment to talk to you guys. As far as this release went, the grid received 2 alternative iterations that never made it out to customers that were rejected. And so the final version that we released was the one that was closest to the result that we wanted, that we knew that we could actually go forward on, versus the other ones that had inherent limitations that we would have been fighting for all time, and then it would have eventually resulted in a rewrite. With 2.8, a lot of the decisions we made as far as design and configuring the UI and putting things together, we had to think of all these things kind of on our feet for the port over to 2.8. So some things aren't as fluid and as perfect as we want it to be, but we're always discussing how we can make it even better. So, things may look rough at this moment. Customers jumping in at this time may find, it's a little hectic, but 2.8 itself is hectic. As the program changes, we're trying to evolve to continue evolving along with it, because every improvement improves us. So, with this next 2.2 update, having UDIMs and Weld support is going to be a game changer, even in its current state. But if it gets even better, it just further raises the roof on what we're possibly able to accomplish in the future. And it's thanks to you, the viewer, that we're able to continue on this journey, this wonderland of plugin development, of talking about tools all day and literally living lives based around tools, which is something I never thought I would do. Hard Ops was originally made to help me write a book, and in the end it turned out that the book was the tool, and that the tool is a constant source of education for me, with users always humbling me, showing me how the tool should actually be used. All we can do is make the tool, but it's up to you, the users, to show us how it's supposed to be done. So I'm eternally grateful for everyone's support, the comments, the likes, the subscribers. I notice every single one of y'all, especially someone, shout out to the Facebook guy, the Facebook guys, Ponty, Ryu, Hutto, everybody who's just killing it over in the Hops Facebook group. The Discord users, y'all are your own breed, keeping the board alive 24 hours a day. I really can't wait to show the next hard ops to y'all. It's been cooking for so long. Just keep that in mind. We've released 10 updates to boxcutter 715, but we just stopped for hard ops. So something big is coming, and we can't wait to show you what comes next. I really miss being able to take the time and talk with you guys, just kind of chat in a video, just telling y'all, what we're thinking of internally here at Team C. But in closing, I just wanted to show something that we've been working on, at least on the Hop side. Real minor, nothing major. It's already in the latest update. If you have the latest update of Hard Ops, when you tap into edit mode, you can select an edge, and if you press Q, you can add a bevel. Everybody knows that. If you press 1, it'll set it to be a profile of 0.5, which is kind of like an auto bevel. If you press 1 again, it'll actually flip it inward, which is what I've been doing for making these corridors. I'll just take a piece and flip it inward like so, and then S sharpen it, and then Shift D duplicate it, and we'll Control A, make the geometry real, and we'll select just this one face, press Control I to delete everything outside of it, and we have just this one piece left. And so we're just going to just make our wall here. So we can bring the wall over, because everything's 2 grid units, basically the size of a cube, it's easily snappable by holding Control. With this shape here, I'm going to go into custom cutter and press C, and we want to select everything, press GZ1. And I just want to show kind of what we were going for with this particular release. The auto hide behavior is something that I'm going to be talking about the moment this video is over, because the auto hiding is something that I feel just probably needs to go at this point. But by creating these little pieces and then drawing them out like you see me doing here, you can even use tilde to rotate it, and holding control to angle snap it. We'll be probably doing a bug fix for this auto hide behavior. In fact, we can actually toggle auto hide here, and things will behave like you would normally expect, with certain pieces still hiding. So, you know, I'll be showing Proxy this video afterwards, and then we'll be getting that particular issue addressed. But the idea is to build a system into boxcutter to allow for like level design. And so right now I'm not on the ball at this moment to really show what we're talking about here, but the corridor I was showing was made that way. So if I bring that up, we can look at this, and it's like a series of pieces for collections, and you can see kind of why I would want to draw collections as squares in order to build things, because of something like this. And building this was actually really easy. I just snapped things and rotated them around. So maybe sometime in the future I'll be going into this more in depth, but I do want to do some tutorials talking about like weapon design and stuff like that. You know, I get a lot of requests where people are like, hey, can you make the Eiffel Tower? Can you make the Borg Cube? Can you make this asset or this asset? And tutorial requests, you know, are one of those things that I'm always considering. I mean, anytime that I'm not doing tutorials, I'm working on what my next tutorial is going to be. I like to practice the techniques and make sure that, you know, I'm on the ball before I get joined in there with the whole planning it out and executing the workflow on a video aspect. But I do want y'all to experiment with the gray box and using custom shapes to draw level design pieces, because I think it's something that we could probably easily pipe in there for the future, especially with Accucut and all of that. All those features can be used together in conjunction to easily just build a quick level. In fact, this piece here, this is the assembly of all the collections, but if we go through the layers, there's layer 1 with all the cameras, layer 2 with all the pieces, and it looks like we actually narrowed down our collection a little bit. So we'll need to collapse scene 2, go to 3, and here we can look at our props. So here's the wall, just a basic wall, and I just took all these pieces on another collection and just modified them, and then just replaced the main scene with collections. So it was a really fun time just to, you know, show a little behind the scenes of how this was put together. Here's the stand that goes in the middle of the floor, and I've actually done quite a few of these, just messing with it, part of something larger I can't really discuss. But here's our ceiling tile, just a little bit of spin goodness in here. While we're looking at spin, an interesting trick that I forgot about that AR taught me recently and reminded me is that you can use unsubdivide in order to redirect your geometry. In order to, for example, we put some edge loops in this cylinder like this. These edge loops are all going vertical and horizontal. If we press Alt V, we can look at the wireframe, and let's actually go in the modifier panel, and we're gonna turn on displace, but we're only gonna unsubdivide it to 1. So now we have a different type of result here. In fact, we can delete these faces, and this is what we have so far. And then if we go under here, I'm actually trying not to show too much hops right now, but just an interesting little tidbit of information I forgot about. You know, whenever it comes to redirecting grids, I'll just have like a plane, and I'll put a couple of subdivs in there, press Shift R to repeat it, and then use poke from the space bar, and then Alt J. And that's one way to work if you're trying to just create a quick grid like this. But there are alternative ways, as I was showing with the non-destructive method. Another one that I want to show before closing out on this is a 3D box or 3D grid cut Grid cut is one of those things. Believe me, I'm discussing it every day because I need grid cut to be great. Previously in videos when I demonstrate grid, we'll actually make 2 grids, so I'll duplicate it. Previously when I would demonstrate grid cut, I would delete all the faces, leaving just the edges, and then I would go to custom cutter, press C to make that the custom shape. And then from here, I'm able to look at it in front view, use view align mode in order to just cut all the way through the shape. And in fact, at that time you saw that it didn't even go through. But that's neither here nor there. We can get in that another time. But the main thing is that with this shape, nothing's been changed. So if we press Q and we put, not weld, my mistake. If we press Q and we go here and we add a screw, but we press 3 to extrude, we get this depth extrusion. You can press C to make that your custom cutter. And instead of working in 2D to get a knife projection grid cut, you can actually just grab this face center and extrude this through with knife, and we have a grid cut in 3D. So this is something I actually didn't know. Whenever we go about the simple shape tool, which will be a series of simple shapes that are quite common, grid will definitely be one of them. 3D grid and 2D grid will need to have varying solutions depending on what type of execution you're doing. But these are the type of things that I'm always thinking about. One day I will have my bisector, my tool that will split a mesh equally along the length of it, depending on X, Y, Z, and a combination of all 3 if needed. But really, I'm just rambling at this point. So I'll just wrap up this video, and I'll see you guys next time. And once again, I thank you all for watching. This has been a Boxcutter TV production. I'll see you guys next time.